Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming today. Prof. André de Villiers is not a stranger to most of you. He has got a very, very distinguished academic career. I'm looking, he has 5 degrees, some from South African universities and one from the UK, culminating in a doctorate in commerce from the University of Victoria. He's been essentially working for the government most of his life. Economic research is his field. He was economic advisor to the Boer government back in the 80s and then joined the University of the North, later renamed Limpopo, where he was the dean of the business school. He's still involved with education here in Hermanus, and he acts as a tutor for business management students who are lucky enough to have his assistance. André is not talking about business today. He's talking about the Duke of Atholl, who I'm very interested to hear about. Please welcome Professor André de Villiers.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it is very good to be here with you and to share with you a real lifetime story, which is a real story. It's all about a Duke from Haenertsburg. I don't know if you know where this place Haenertsburg is. I suppose many people will have no idea where this place Haenertsburg is. Anyhow, it's a small little village located in a scenic Magubaskloof area of the Limpopo province, midway between the towns of Polokwane and Sanin. So I think many people have got no idea where this place Haenertsburg is, but that is where it all happened, in Haenertsburg. And today is about the Duke from Haenertsburg. It's also a most unusual story. Many people who never expected that person would become a Duke, but that is really what happened. So this is then a strange tale of a retired South African land surveyor who very reluctantly accepted a royal title in Scotland. So here is first to show you a picture of this castle. Of course, in Scottish, they refer to it as Blair Castle on Atholl Estate. We understand it means Blair means a field or a plain. And it all happened, the story can pick up right back to 1260, where the Atholl family purchased a piece of land, 145,000 acres in extent, in the start of Garry in Scotland, and built a castle there. And this then changed hands twice. It was first changed to Sir James Stewart, who bought this estate and a castle in 1310. And then again, it changed hands once again when a William Murray, Sir William Murray, then through a marriage of a daughter of the Stewart family, he became the owner of the estates and the castle. So from that date, from 1649, the specific piece of land in the Atholl estate, and the castle has been in the ownership of the Murray clan. So they were all then, as time goes on, were elevated to higher titles. And the first time when this title was linked to that name of estate was in 1676, when a second Earl of Atholl became the first Marquis, and he was called the Marquis of Atholl in 1676. And then the first one who became a Duke was a John Murray. He was elevated to the title of the first Duke of Atholl in 1703. So that's where it really started. There is then a picture of this castle. A picture was taken about in the 1890s. It's whitewashed. It's not very imposing. Four stories, about 30 rooms, and a grand hall. But that is precisely how it was built in the early 1260s. And still today, it's been unchanged. Over time, there's been many outbuildings that's been added to it, but the same basic castle still stands there today. And there today is a view of modern-day Blair Castle. And in front of there, we see the members of the Atholl Highlanders busy with a military exercise. This also is an unusual story. At one stage, Queen Victoria paid a visit to the castle and estate, and the Duke of Atholl at that stage asked her for permission. Can he establish his own private army? Because he wants to defend his castle and his estates. And Queen Victoria, quite friendly, then issued a royal decree that the Duke of Atholl will be allowed to set up his own private army. And up to this day, in Britain. That's the only place in Britain where there is a private army. It's on the Atholl estate in Scotland. It's made up of about 100 volunteers. It's got a pipe band and it's used for all these marches and ceremonies when a new duke is inducted or whatever happens. But especially today, to entertain all the visitors coming to visit us, there is this wonderful entertainment of a private army and a marching pipe band. And like this, they are do some exercise to entertain the visitors, but all well dressed in their kilts. There again are two views of this. Blair Castle is now seen today, and over the years, a number of outbuildings has been added. There is a barrack which would house the Atholl Highlanders, has been added to it, where they are then housed. There's also a house, tourist accommodation. There are restaurants. There is a whiskey distillery as well. So all this makes up now the present day Blair Castle as it now stands today. It's actually run now as a full-time business. And we are informed that during the summer season, about 140,000 visitors come and visit Blair Castle every year. It's really now being into a real business venture. Right now, these royal titles in Britain can be quite confusing to many of us. And just to put this into perspective, it starts at the level of a baron and baroness. The next level is a viscount, a viscountess. And then comes your earl, a countess, and then a marquis, a marchioness, and then a duke and a duchess. These are the titles which are applicable in terms of the structure. Now, it's interesting to know that from the level of earl, marquis, and duke, the title is also then linked to a specific place, being an estate, a town, or a city, or a county. So, like for instance, the example of the grandson of the Queen, Prince William, is a Duke of Cambridge. Another interesting example, which we might know about, which has got a link to South Africa, was Bendor Grosvenor, the second Duke of Westminster, who served as the aide-de-camp of Lord Milner during the Anglo-Boer War in South Africa. He was the second Duke of Westminster. And another story, he also has been established an estate in South Africa as well, the Duke of Westminster. But it's not on his story today. Right, now just to then go through all the Dukes of Atholl, because it was since 1703 when the first member of the Murray clan was then elevated and then conferred the title of Duke. And today there has been 12 Dukes of Atholl from the Murray clan. There was first a John Murray, then there was a James Murray, then there was another John Murray, another John Murray, another John Murray, and then there was a George Murray. And then there was another John Murray, and another John Murray, and then a James Murray, and then an Ian Murray, and another John Murray, and today the final one is a Bruce Murray. So there's been 12 Dukes of Atholl up to the stage. Now, the interesting slant to the story is that the first 10 Dukes of Atholl were all men who were born in Scotland and lived full-time during their reign in the castle on the estate. The last two Dukes of Atholl were men who were born in South Africa, and they did not and do not live full-time on the castle and estate. They remained living in South Africa and only did visit the castle and estate to attend to all the ceremonies and duties which attached to the title, but they don't and did not live in in Scotland at all. They were the last two, John Murray and Bruce Murray. So how did it all happen, the shift of a title from Scotland to South Africa? How did it all come about? It started when Ian Murray, the 10th Duke of Atholl, was a bachelor. He never married. So there was no male heir then to the title could be passed on. So that was a real issue. If you remember, you looked at the dates, he was the Duke from 1957 to 1996. But there was then a real problem. And then as from the 1990s, it was an important issue now to try and identify, but who will be the next person? Because it goes, if it's not in that family tree, there must be to another branch of the family, it must be found, but there must be someone who's a John Murray, which a Murray, which can be then taken the title. And the research then identified one John Murray who lived in Haenertsburg in South Africa as being the next person to be conferred as a title of Duke of Atholl. That was quite a surprise to many, many people. And the first reaction himself from John Murray himself was, no, thank you, no, thank you. I have no interest to accept a title to become a duke. I've got no interest to live in Scotland at all. I was born in South Africa. I lived all my life in South Africa. Certainly, I don't want to live in Scotland. And certainly, I don't want to become the owner of a castle and estate to be responsible for its maintenance and access. Please, no thank you. But the news was persistent. No, in terms of the rules, in terms of the royal lineage, you are the next Duke of Atholl. And that must be done. So John Murray then sent an inquiry to the office of Lord King of Arms to say, in terms of all these royal rules, how can I escape from this responsibility, but do it in a good manner? Do it correctly. How can I escape from this? And the office answered me, there are only two valid reasons by which you can. You don't have to accept the title. There are only two reasons. The first one, if you die. The second one, if you're found guilty in a court of law on a serious criminal offense. Those are the only two reasons which will then set you free from this responsibility. But if you willfully decide not to accept this title, the title of Duke of Atholl will cease to exist. That was then the issue. And Don, being a balanced person, they knew, and then they said, well, there is no way out. There is no way out of this matter. I will have to accept this responsibility. And yes, indeed, there is. That's only one thing to be done. So yes, so that happened then that Ian Murray then traveled to South Africa in 1993. He met with John Murray in a Maguba hotel close to Haenertsburg. And there must have been a serious discussion between these two Murrays on that day, how to solve this matter, what can be done about it. But a compromise was found and it was then agreed on. First, it was agreed that John Murray said, okay, I will accept the title of Duke of Atholl when Ian Murray dies. I'm willing to do so, but on condition, I will not live in that castle full-time in Scotland. I will only visit that castle for a number of weeks of the year and weeks of the season to attend to all the ceremonial duties attached to the title of Duke. But then for the rest, I want to remain living in Haenertsburg. I don't want to live there. And secondly, I certainly don't want to inherit ownership of the castle and estate and be responsible for that. That is my condition. And that was accepted by Ian Murray. The tenant said, okay, that's an order that was accepted. And then, so he said, I'll only want to accept that to attend to those ceremonial duties. So Ian Murray then agreed that he will form a family trust, and a family trust will then become the owner of the castle and estate, and will then be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep and whole running of the whole business of those visitors, the whiskey distillery, all those issues which is their part of that castle. They will then, and that will be a responsibility then of the family trust. When he dies, the family trust will take full ownership of the castle and the estates. The family trust will also then be willing then to fund the annual travel and accommodation costs of the new Duke of Atholl and his family when they visit this castle, but they will receive no financial stipend, anything for it. There's no remuneration involved in this agreement. So that was the agreement which was compromise found, and shook on it and signed about it. That was the agreement. But what was the reaction from society and media? The first reaction from society and media was very negative. That was something that was not normal, and was certainly in the royal circles in Britain, in the news media, the general attitude, the general reaction was very, very negative about this matter. And there was scathing comments from the media when the detail was made known to the public. So one British newspaper published a scathing comment: the new South African Duke of Atholl does not wear a kilt, and he does not even drink whiskey. That's bad form, absolutely bad form. That is unacceptable. So that was the first sort of thought of a comment which came out of it. So really not well received. The matter was also discussed, published in South Africa, also in some of the newspapers. The Johannesburg newspaper made the following comments: "What a foolish decision! Local man does not accept his rightful inheritance worth millions of pounds. What a fool! What a fool!" So that was sort of the first reactions which was found in many places. But nevertheless, that was funny. But there is our John Murray. This was picture taken in 1993 when he was 64 years old. I think we can all see he looks like a normal man. He looks like a normal man who can just want to mind his own business. That was John Murray when all this happened in 1993. That was what happened. Now then, the story is, but who was this John Murray? Where did he come about? What was his background? And it can be picked up, his story, that after the end of the First World War, a number of ex-servicemen, British ex-servicemen of the officer class, formed the Officer Colonial Land Company, which was known as Ofcolaco. And they, then in 1920, bought land in a Tzaneen district of South Africa. The purpose, they will immigrate to South Africa and they will settle on the land and become farmers and make a new start in life after they went through all the trials and tribulation of the First World War. So that was the plan, and that indeed happened at a time. It was a good choice of place to buy land in South Africa. I don't know if you know the Tzaneen area, is the so-called Lowveld area of South Africa. Very positive climate, rainfall soils for fruit and vegetable production. And even today, if anyone has traveled that area, you will see it's an intensive farming area. Intensive farming of citrus, avoes, bananas, lychees, and tomatoes on a very large scale. You might know about a well-known for sale company. It's called ZZ2. They are in that Letsiteli area on this Lowvelds. And this company has been invited of many farms as the largest tomato producer in the Southern Hemisphere. It's a huge operation. So the Lowvelds is certainly a very excellent choice of a place to have farming. And that's where the Ofcolaco company then bought the land and for the purpose of settling this ex-serviceman. So one of these people who settled there was a Lieutenant Colonel Harry Bridgman. He was one of the settlers, and after he'd been there for some time, he then invited his cousin, Major George Murray, who at that stage was a bachelor, who also served in the First World War, to come and join him there in South Africa on this Lowveld area in Tzaneen, and also become a farmer. And that is how then George Murray then immigrated to South Africa and also they started to manage one of the farms in that settlement. Then George Murray met and married Joan Eastwood, a member of a well-known British family there in 1928. And George Murray then bought his own small farm in the Downs area of Tzaneen, where the family moved. And then we had his own farm and where he farmed it for his own account. And their only child, John, was born in 1929. This is in our John Murray. He was born in 1929 in the Downs area of Tzaneen. Let's carry on the story. When John then reached 6 years of age, he did not start his formal school education because there was no school in that area. So for the first 3 years, his parents just taught him the basics of reading, writing, doing sums. And only when he was 9 years old, his parents sent him as a boarder for the first time to a real school. It was a Parktown preparatory school in Johannesburg. He started their school at the age of 9. But John, of course, quickly picked up and completed his primary school education at Parktown. Then for high school, his parents then sent him to Michael House Private School in Atholl Midlands, where then he matriculated. So that is where John Murray then matriculated. Yeah, okay. So after school, he did first 1 year of a military service, and then he enrolled at the University of the Witwatersrand for the 4-year academic program for a BSc degree in land surveying, which he completed successfully. He did after that then also did some 6 months of internship, and then he fully qualified as a land surveyor. And that was then his career for his whole life, working as a land surveyor in many parts of the then Northern Transvaal, but also in that state, Southern Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, Northern Rhodesia, Zambia. But he was then, for his whole career, he was a land surveyor. He was also a member of the team of land surveyors which did the land demarcation, the access road, the shifting of people in small villages for the building of the Akariba Dam. It was a huge project in those days. He was involved in that too. So that was John Murray. He was a land surveyor. Right, to continue, he then married Margaret Leach from Utrecht. It's also known as Peggy Leach, and they married in 1956. And then they had 3 children, the eldest daughter Jennifer, and 2 sons, Bruce and Craig. And that was in a Murray family. And then John retired from his active work in 1989 at the age of 60, and the couple settled in Haenertsburg village for a peaceful retirement. That was what their plans was. And John, we all knew John. I think our friends from Haenertsburg, I think we all knew John and Peggy well. John was certainly well liked. He enjoyed his hiking. David also remembers on first day in Haenertsburg, there was a so-called first day club. And the men went hiking on first day. It was the first day club. And John Murray was an active member of the first day club for many, many years. He enjoyed his hiking. And of course, Peggy was very active in the social matters of the small village, small community. And they were very well settled in this village of Haenertsburg. John also still continued to do some land surveying work for private clients when there was such a time. At one stage, I also asked him, because we were living on a small holding, and I asked John to do the surveying that I could subdivide a small holding, and he did very well. It met all the legal requirements, and I never knew what important person did that work for me. Only very later than I knew that. But certainly John and Peggy Murray was well respected. Everyone just knew them as normal, humble friends. That was where everyone knew John and Peggy Murray. Right, and then 1996, Ian Murray, the 10th Duke of Atholl, died. And now was the time for John and Peggy Murray to be inducted as a new Duke and Duchess of Atholl. The time has arrived. They then travelled to Scotland, settled in apartments in Blair Castle on the Atholl estate, and then with much fanfare, the view of many members of Royal Society, including Prince Charles and other members of Royal Society present. Other members, dukes and earls and counts were all present for this grand affair, with marching of the Atholl Highlanders, playing of the pipe bands. He was formally then inducted into his title as John Murray as His Grace and Margaret Murray as Her Grace, the 11th Duke and Duchess of Atholl. It was a grand affair which happened in that season in 1996. In the process, John was also appointed to a number of also other titles. I cannot give you all the titles. The book, which I was referred right to the end, is my source. He actually was conferred on 11 titles in total, but I can only refer to some of these titles. He was also made in the Commander-in-Chief of the Atholl Highlanders, which means that he would take the salute when they were marching, and he was the Commander-in-Chief. He was also then appointed as an honorary commander of the Transvaal Scottish Regiment, which was based in Johannesburg. He was also there honorary commander of that regiment. And then he was for this whiskey, the International Whiskey Association, he was appointed a patron for the keepers of the Quash. If I can pronounce that Scottish word correctly, that was also one of the titles which he was given, task he was given. And of course, he was given a task then to open the Highland Games, where there's much Scottish dancing and tossing of the caber, and that was also one part of his duties. And then not already in 1996, but quite some years later, in 2011, it was also in terms of his service the estate of Atholl. He was formerly also made a Knight of the Venerable Order of St. John. And this ceremony took place in Johannesburg. At that stage, that was only in 2011 that took place, but that is the final, most senior title which was conferred on him. And his son was then given a title of Lord Bruce Murray, Marquis of Tulubadin. Now, at that stage, Bruce was divorced from his first wife. They were single, but he had two sons, Michael and David Murray. At that stage in 1996, they were still teenage boys, still at school. They were also present at all the grand affairs. But Lord Bruce Murray was also immediately commissioned as an officer in Atholl Highlanders. But the two sons, not at that stage, but when they reached the age of 18 years old, both Michael and David Murray was also commissioned as members of the Atholl Highlanders. But that happened a few years later. Right, there are then some pictures just to show. Here they are marching. The Atholl Highlanders on parade, splendid in the kilts and marching down, and there's a pipe band in front of them. And that's our look. And of course, in the background, you see there is the Blair Castle can be seen. And that was part of the parades on all those time, was this type of parade which happened over and over again. And of course, the Duke was the person then to give the salute. And there indeed is the Duke of Atholl in a relaxed mood with the two senior officers of the Atholl Highlanders. But you see the Duke is in the center, and he's got the special in his cap is something else which no one else has, to show that he's a Duke. The other people have got normal caps, but he's got a feather in the cap to show that he is the Duke. There he is, splendidly dressed in his kilt. That is how it looked in that's in 1996 when it all happened there in Scotland. And there's the Duke of Atholl when he inspects his regiment. You can see there he is dressed, and you see he walks taking the salute, and he takes later. And there they could see that the Murray tartan is also very clearly then seen there. That was all happened with all those parades and those first few weeks when this was all happening right there. There was he in action. And there is the Duchess of Atholl inspecting the guard of the Atholl Highlanders also doing her duty. So there was all these things was very much happening at that stage, and it was very active. And you can see in the background is a large crowd of spectators, because all this is certainly an interesting thing to watch and to view what's all happening. That's with these type of grand parades. And there's then the Duke with his son and grandson, with his son Lord Bruce Murray, and the two sons Michael and David. The source could not exactly identify the date of these, because in 1996 his two sons would have been 11 and 10 years old. I think this must be a few years later, but it cannot be exactly identified the year. I expect they might be now as sort of, I don't know if they're already 16 or 18 years old, but there they are. They are in the Duke. So at that stage, Bruce was still divorced, so he was a single. He did not have a wife. Right, just to tell a few things of what happened. So then after this all happened, then after 6 weeks, the Duke and Duchess then came back to Haenertsburg, and they would, this is again John and Peggy Murray, just again part of Haenertsburg, but they would share with their friends some of the music incidents would happen to them. One incident was that John recounted how we had a discussion with Prince Charles. And Prince Charles wanted to know about his son Bruce, because Bruce will be most likely the next Duke of Atholl. Yes, John says, my son Bruce lives in Utrecht, in the Limpopo province of South Africa. He's got his own business. He produces advertising posters and signs and leaflets. That is his business. And as a sideline, he also produces paper from elephant dung. Prince Charles said, how exciting! That was, he was very much impressed with this. That was exciting. And Peggy also told her story on the first night when they moved into the apartment. They settled down, and then they felt to have a cup of tea, but there was no sign of any of these items in the apartment. So Peggy said, okay, I'll go to the kitchen and make her some tea. So down the steps of the castle, down to the kitchen, and there she encountered a very stern housekeeper who said, Duchess, You are not allowed to come into the kitchen. If you want any service, just ring the bell. Well, that was the rules. And she knew that is now the new life. It's not the same. There's just another picture of the whole family, which was taken in 2002, where more members of the family all then went together to Blair Atholl Castle, and we're together. On the left is Martin Lodek. He's the husband of Lady Jennifer. She is the eldest daughter. That's the Lady Jennifer. Next to her is her brother, Lord Craig, and Lady Inga Marie. They live in Scotland. They live in Canada. Sorry, they live in Canada. But they are then. He's the second son then of the Duke is Lord Craig Murray and his wife, Lady Inga Murray. And there then, of course, a Duke and a Duchess, and of course, their son, Lord Bruce Murray. At that stage, he was still divorced and still unmarried. That was a picture of the whole family getting together once and enjoying all to get together. All right, but there's John Murray back in Haenertsburg. But we immediately say that the original negative perceptions of the Duke and Duchess very quickly vanished. Most people then immediately recognized they then did their duty with dignity and humility, and those first few negative comments just disappeared immediately. They made many friends in Scotland of the Royal Society, locals, visitors, and they were really accepted as doing their duty well. But being back in Haenertsburg, walking by the shop, John Murray was just again John Murray, because I only visited Scotland for 6 weeks every year in a summer season. The rest, they were back in Haenertsburg. And John would then be willing then to amuse the local people if they want to ask him to really give some color to their local events. Be quite willing to don his kilt and then take part of the local events. So he would, for instance, then open the annual Haenertsburg Spring Fair, dressed in his kilt, and he would do that, and quite a few things. He was quite willing just to be in good manners, but he was quite willing. But he was just normal. Another thing which happened, the Transvaal Scottish Highlanders also once came to visit Haenertsburg in honor of the Duke, and they and a pipe band and marched through the streets of Haenertsburg. The Duke was there in his kilt, taking a salute, and we could all enjoy the spectacle. It was a wonderful spectacle. So, and this happened then for 17 years, that John and Peggy Murray went to Scotland as Duke and Duchess for 17 years, busy with that. And the Duke of Atholl, John Murray, passed away in 2012 at the age of 83 years. And there were then 3 services held in his honor. The one service was held in Haenertsburg, in Haenertsburg Hall. His family and friends were present to give honor and remembrance of this man, John Murray, our own Duke. There was also a service held in Johannesburg by the Transvaal Scottish Regiment, also in his honor. And there was also a service held at Blair Castle on the Atholl Estate, also in his honor. And it was recorded in a newspaper that the speakers at the service at Blair Castle in Atholl spake warmly with respect of the Duke and the Duchess, the way how they were willing to undertake their duty, as despite it was not their own choice. It was not their own choice to be a Duke, but I really remembered him with respect that the way he did conduct himself in all those duties as a Duke, and he was fondly remembered and lauded as well done. That was really that last stop, yeah. That was then a time now for a new Duke to take over, his son, Bruce Murray. Bruce Murray was then to be inducted then as the 12th Duke of Atholl. Bruce Murray, who lives in Louis-Trichardt in the Limpopo province. That stage, Bruce has been married then for his second wife, Charmaine. And the interesting slant now is that Charmaine comes from an Afrikaans background. Her maiden surname is De Toy. So the present Duchess of Atholl is South African with an Afrikaans background. And they were then inducted then as Bruce and Charmaine as the 12th Duke and Duchess of Atholl. And Duke Bruce also received all the same titles as his father, the commander of the Atholl Highlanders, and all those titles, the patron of the keeps on question all those same titles, also the same arrangement, that you also will only visit their castle for 6 weeks every year for all those duties. But the same arrangement as his father is now Bruce Barry, is now the present Duke of Atholl. And now the two sons at this stage of 1912, they were already now grown-up people, 27 years and 26 years old. And the eldest son was then given the title of Lord Michael Murray, Marquis of Tullibardine. And his second son was given the title of Lord David Murray, the Earl of Strathspey and Strathardle. So that is now the two sons. So they are in the same. And there back in Haenertsburg, there is the Dowager Duchess in Haenertsburg, living in the same house and still going to the same morning markets on Saturday mornings. Peggy Murray, the Dowager Duchess, is still at the same place, well loved, well respected, and everyone knows us. So this is then from the book, but mainly from the book, a well-known author, Louis Chandon. He is a local historian. He's been living in Haenertsburg for many, many years. He wrote a number of books, and he did the research for this well-researched book, which he wrote on the Duke of Haenertsburg. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? Professor André de Villiers.
Has the regiment ever seen any battle?
No.
Ever fired a shot?
Never.
Okay. And I know Haenertsburg quite well. I never met the Duke, but I used to do a bit of fly fishing. It was very good. Recommend it.
I can just tell about Haenertsburg. Yeah, certainly Haenertsburg, of course, is certainly a lovely scenic area. For tourists, it's like fly fishing, hiking, very active place, very lovely guest house and so forth. And it's a small community, but yes, very, very active, and many people come to visit us. When we're still there, they call it annual spring fair and all these events. It's a very active place, yeah.
Stanford Dam,
yeah,
is a great fishing venue there.
That's right.
Is there any relation to the village up the road?
Stanford.
No, I'm not quite sure about this connection, but Stanford, of course, there they also built a private school there, of course, just next to Stanford Lake. And of course, it's called Stanford College. It is a private school. And it took grandsons of a Duke who were both there at that school. But I think that Stanford, there was at that stage a little bit of argument. It's also a Stanford College in America. And I said, you can't use our name. There was a little argument which was sorted out.
Yes, Stanford University.
It's of course Stanford University.
Oh, the University of California.
University. So there was an argument, you're not allowed to use your name. And there was some little adjustments was done. I'm not quite sure if so it was then agreed. It's still called, it was called Stanford Lake College.
Yeah.
And yeah, they solved that problem.
Yes, have a first.
Thank you. That was very interesting, André. Having lived in Zanin for 25 years, I was very fond of John Murray, and I was a member of the Thursday Club that hiked in the mountains. And I remember he hiked at a brisk trot. We all had to run to keep up with him. Very fit man, but very humble. But interestingly enough, just down the road from Haenertsburg is Tito Mboweni's country estate. And Tito, I had the pleasure of asking him to write the foreword for one of my books, The Footprints in Zanin. He was born in Zanin, and also a very likable fellow, and well-known and well-liked in Haenertsburg. He has no airs and graces. He's happy to meet with people and so on. Anyway, the village of Haenertsburg is a wonderful little, like an English, John Buchan described it as he would love to have lived there. It reminded him of Scotland, the rolling downs and the lake. So lots of memories, and you brought them back. Thank you. Thank you.
Gern wants to know what's the name of the whiskey they produce in their castle.
It's called Atholl Single Malt Whiskey. Atholl Single Malt.
Atholl Single Malt. Have you got a question, Andrew?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I just wanted to know what the relationship was between John and the previous Duke, because I think with the English titles, some of these, or Scottish titles, some of these things can disappear quite easily if there's not a fairly close relationship.
Yeah, it's also shown in a book by Villiers. The research then connected them to the fourth Duke of Atholl. They both are directly linked to the fourth Duke of Atholl. On that basis, it was decided that he must be the next Duke. So I can't explain it, but the book just specified that that's what happens. It was research, and both of them directly linked to the fourth Duke of Atholl.
Possibly just a bit of the side, the link between the Duke and the Andrew Murray people in South Africa, and members of the Murray clan. I was wondering how many people here are members of the Murray clan. I'm a descendant of Andrew Murray, and we wonder how this fits in, because we assume that the Duke of Atholl is the head of our clan, and we call Murray of Tullibardine, which is also the name of the tartan. Can you explain the connection?
Now, I'm afraid on this one I don't have, because in the book there's actually no mention of Andrew Murray's family at all. I must assume there is, but I couldn't see anything in the book about it. I just specified that that Duke was from a specific branch of the Murray clan. So I can't answer your question. There was no info in the book on that issue.
Yeah, I can give a part answer that there in fact are two tartans. There's the Atholl tartan and there's the Tullibardine tartan, and the Murray clan in South Africa tend to come from the Atholl side of it somehow. I'm not quite sure what the connection is between the two tartans, but there is, we have a common ancestor somewhere back. It might be as far back as the third Duke or something, but we are all related, but it's not a close relationship with the Duke.
Gary Blair's estate in Johannesburg was named Blair Atholl. How did that come about?
Yeah, the book also does not specify, but it does mention that quite a few places in Africa. There's also in Johannesburg also a suburb, I think, with the name of Atholl. Not. Yes. There's quite a few names linked to Atholl. The only book which references that also it must be the family members of this Murray clan, but it does not actually give the exact reason. But you know, I can't give the exact answer. The book doesn't give me that information.
My question is really about where the estate of Atholl is in Scotland, and is it still the same size that it was when it was originally divided, or has it been divided up?
It just identifies it in the Strait of Garry in Persia, in the Scottish Highlands. That's why I've been identifying where it is. It specifies that the same size, 145,000 acres, is the size of the estate, and it's not been subdivided or sold. And so it's running a business, but it now has got a number of tenant farmers who actually then rent and use the land. But information is still the same original size of the land.
Okay, thank you, everybody.